One more home a shovelful near to completion, a home that in the bustling Britain of 1964 is badly needed. They've been building this 3-bedroom chalet for 2 weeks now, and when it's finished, the estate agents hope it'll sell for about £4,000. According to a recent report from the ministry, we've built 4.5 million houses in Britain since the war. Houses of all shapes and sizes, ranging from the palatial all-mod-con detached mansion to the rows of terraced houses that form a faceless wall around every town. Millions of families live out their lives in happy, snug homes like these, and millions don't. Today, thousands of families are wasting their lives in slums and old, squalid rooms, and having to pay exorbitant rents for this doubtful privilege. Throughout the country, there are at least 500,000 families living in intolerable conditions who need houses immediately. And finally, tragically, there are nearly 3,000 homeless people being sheltered in London County Council's hostels in the autumn of last year. What's wrong? The current rate of house building is 300,000 a year, and it's not enough. It's interesting to note that the skills and tools being employed on this construction site are similar to those used in the building of the pyramids almost 4,000 years ago. Of course, there have been changes, but it's still essentially bricks and mortar assembled on the site and subject to all the vagaries of the weather which has constantly bedeviled the building industry.
But at long last, there is the ominous rumble of change coming from a large new factory at Lenwade in Norfolk, where trucks carry the seeds of revolution and the main ingredients of instant homes, or to give it the proper name, industrialized building.
This factory will turn out 6 high-quality flats a day composed of parts like this, which can weigh from 1 to 5 tons. The components leave the factory complete, with floor and wall insulation installed, with conduits ready for electrical wiring and water supplies, with door and window frames cast in and painted, and the windows glazed. Specially constructed trucks will come up this siding here and pick up the components and convey them upright to their destinations.
When the panels are fitted together on the site, the only jobs remaining are the hanging of doors, electrical wiring, and final painting. The first flats to be erected by this method in Britain are for the London County Council's £2 million housing scheme at Morris Walk, Woolwich, the most advanced full-scale application of modern industrialized building in this country. We asked the managing director of the company, Mr. L.A. Trafford, if this was the answer to the housing shortage.
I don't think it is the answer to the housing problem, but it will help very greatly to solve the housing problem of this country.
Do you think this method is going to revolutionize the building industry?
I would be rather careful using this word. I would think that it will give the additional help which the traditional building industry requires.
Will it be cheaper than established methods?
Provided the quantities are there for the factory to produce, it must be cheaper.
How do the building unions feel about all this?
I think the unions are rather happy and they are encouraging this system. Their members are working under ideal conditions without any break throughout the year.
What are the advantages of this particular method, apart from the weather, for example?
Well, provided the planning is done properly in advance, the work is carried out in the factory under controlled conditions, and erection and finishes will carry out throughout the year, irrespective of the weather.
Is there any danger of this sort of method resulting in shoddy and monotonous-looking buildings?
None at all. You must remember that the architect in charge of any one particular project is the man who determines what the exterior should look like. You have an enormous amount of variation which you can have in color, in size. You can have 10-story, 3-story blocks all mixed up together in one development, balconies, no balconies. This is entirely up to the architect who designs the scheme.
What about the company's plans for the future?
Well, we are negotiating with a number of public authorities, and we hope the next large contract will be in the Northeast. And we are planning to erect factories throughout the British Isles in important centres.
Talk of standardization always provokes fear of monotony in appearance. Standardization of parts has been carried much farther elsewhere in Europe, and there are some extremely standardized blocks of concrete flats to show for it. But prefabricated parts can be put together in many different ways, and this can lead to great variety in building and in the materials used. The building industry employs more than 1 million people. One of them, who's just switched from the old to the new method, is Fred Bennett.
Bennett, you've been in building all your life. What made you come to work here at Lenwade?
Well, it's a new enterprise, and it was an opportunity to be trained in modern methods of building technique under ideal conditions.
How do conditions here compare with those on a traditional building site?
Oh, very well indeed. You'll see we have a lovely modern factory here to work in, warm, and we have nice canteen with changing room and washroom facilities. Everything necessary, really, for the comfort of the man here.
What particular training did you have here?
I was trained under Danish foremen and other supervisors. Of course, my basic training in the building industry as a skilled tradesman helped me immensely.
What's the pay like here?
The pay, union rates of pay and conditions prevail in this factory. Of course, the great advantage is that we have continuous work all the year round, which one doesn't get outside in the traditional building industry.
Because here you're protected from the weather.
Of course we are.
And you have light whenever you want it.
Definitely.
Now, you're working on these modern flats. Would you like to live in one of them yourself?
Most definitely I would, yes.
Like so many other modern innovations, industrialized building is in danger of being regarded as the open sesame along the road to a housing utopia where there are no shortages and no problems. This it cannot be. But many experts believe the housing industry is now in the same state that the car industry had reached 50 years ago. We asked Kenneth Robinson, an architectural correspondent and design expert, to give his opinions on the potentialities of industrialized housing. Do you think that this form of industrialized housing is going to solve our housing problem?
Well, it certainly ought to. When you look at systems like this, and there are more and more of them available both in this country and on the continent, you realize that we have the technical knowledge to build just as fast as we like if we can only acquire the land as fast. I think it's obvious that we could really start solving the housing problem very quickly today if enough people were really interested. After all, there's nothing very remarkable about factory-made housing in a machine age. What is so remarkable, I think, is that it's taken so disgracefully long for us to get around to doing it at all.
You say we're disgracefully late using this kind of building. Why are we so late?
I think it's simply that in Britain we don't take the housing situation seriously. We never have done. We think in terms of statistics, in terms of the number of units of accommodation we're going to build during the year, and not in terms of human misery and the quickest way of putting all that right.
But surely if we're going to use this system, it does mean we're taking the whole thing seriously.
It does mean that one group is taking it seriously, including here the London County Council, and to be quite fair, there are other local authorities, Hull, Yorkshire, Leeds and so on, who are using their own systems of industrialized housing, but we're getting nowhere yet near a national housing drive.
If this did happen, could this particular system solve our housing problem?
This particular system wouldn't in its present form. There's a strong feeling that we must continue to build 80% of our housing in 2 or 3 stories, and that we should only go high, as this system goes, when we really have to. That it's inhuman to build too high. Whether this is true or not, it's a sad fact that it's easier to build cheaply and easier to build fast if you do build in high flats. The factory-made systems for 2-story housing simply cannot compete yet with the old forms of building, with the old forms of brick upon brick.
What then is the answer to the problem, do you think?
Well, we keep coming back to the same thing, which is to get the customers together, to get the local authorities to pool their resources and their needs and to pool mass production. But it doesn't necessarily have to be large-scale stuff such as we've seen today. It can be partial prefabrication in which you simply eliminate one or two of the skilled trades like the plasterer or the carpenter.
And what are these skilled tradesmen going to say about this?
Well, I don't think there's been any trouble so far, and I don't think there will be, because there's a great need for skilled labour elsewhere, as well as in housing. And in any case, we're running very short of skilled labour. I think there's one bricklayer for every 6 jobs in the country at the moment. And in any case, it won't be long before the building operative is going to demand the clean working conditions that every other factory worker on the whole gets.
Now, as to the Lenwade factory, what is this going to mean to the country?
Well, it is marvellous to see this factory in operation, but it saddens one even the more to feel that this sort of production does depend on the whims of local councillors. It depends on the deadheads really getting on with the job. The Lenwade thing, I think, above all, is a first-class piece of architectural finish. By using flint panels instead of ordinary concrete, it's going to be something that looks a great deal better than the rather weather-worn concrete buildings we see around us all the time.
Buildings like these could replace the squalid slums of many of our major cities and towns if industrialized building methods prove to be a success. Let's hope that the day is not too far away when every family can be sure of having a home of its own. Not just a roof over its head, but a home which provides the comforts which modern science has made available. For a happy home is the firm foundation for a happy life.